Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really going deep, plunging headfirst into this fascinating, maybe slightly unsettling idea
Mm-hmm.
about the algorithm shaping our world.
Mm-hmm.
Forget, maybe just for a moment, artificial intelligence. What if the really big story is artificial communication?
Exactly. Yeah, we're diving into the insights from Elena Esposito's book, Artificial Communication. And it really does propose this different way to look at things, seeing algorithms not just as, potential thinking machines, but as actual active participants in communication.
And our mission here is to pull out the absolute must-know takeaways from this research for you.
Yeah.
This isn't about whether a computer can think like a human.
No.
It's about how algorithms are fundamentally changing how we interact, how information flows, maybe even our sense of self and time.
Yeah, the book covers so much ground. How algorithms interact with each other, how they structure what we see online, how they handle language, images, how they personalize things.
Personalization, yeah.
Memory, prediction, it's all in there,
Yeah.
but viewed through this specific lens of communication.
Okay, so let's start right there with that core argument, because it does feel like a bit of a paradigm shift. The book's
Yeah.
saying the truly earth-shattering thing isn't machines getting smart like us,
Right.
but becoming these sophisticated partners in communication.
That's the nub of it. We get so caught up in the usual AI hype cycle, the Turing test, the singularity, are the robots coming?
Right, are they going to win?
Yeah. And this book just says, hold on a second, maybe the really profound shift is happening somewhere else, like in our everyday interactions.
You mean like when I'm typing an email and Gmail just finishes my sentence?
Exactly that. Or when you're, trying to buy tickets online and you end up talking to a bot.
Or trying to get customer service help, yeah.
Or think about Spotify, right?
Mm.
How its algorithm puts together your Discover Weekly playlist. It's communicating musical ideas to you based on what it, quote unquote, knows.
That's a great example. Or even algorithms that are actually writing stuff. Articles, reports.
Yeah.
The source mentions companies like Narrative Science doing this. That's definitely communication.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the bit the book highlights that
Mm.
it resonates with that general discomfort we sometimes feel.
Uh-huh.
The better these algorithms get at being communication partners, the more they suggest things accurately, the more they seem to anticipate us, the more human-like they seem.
Creepier it gets.
Exactly, the creepier it feels. And the source asks, is our anxiety about thinking machines maybe a bit misplaced? Should we be looking more closely at the impact of this artificial communication?
That's a really powerful framing. And okay, one of the key insights from the book about why they're so effective at this
Yeah.
is because they don't try to think like us. They don't aim for
No.
deep understanding.
This is absolutely crucial. Modern machine learning especially, it's largely abandoned that old AI goal of mimicking human thought or figuring out why things happen. Its power comes from focusing relentlessly on prediction and just finding correlations and patterns, but in absolutely vast amounts of data.
So it doesn't care why I like a certain band.
Yeah.
Just the people who listen to this also tend to listen to that.
Pretty much. And the book makes the point that algorithms often develop these communication skills by, essentially by feeding on our own online activity.
Mm-hmm.
Every click, every share, every link, that's the raw material. That's what trains these systems to communicate back to us effectively.
Which connects to this idea of communication the source uses from Luhmann, the sociologist, that communication doesn't need a sender with a specific meaning in mind. It just needs a receiver to understand that something was communicated.
Exactly. The algorithm can trigger that reaction, and you click the link, you respond to the bot without the algorithm itself needing any kind of understanding in the human sense. It just needs to produce the right output based on the patterns it learned.
And you even see this when they try to make them seem more lifelike, right? Programming and little quirks, artificial unpredictability.
Yeah, like those little robots designed to surprise you or react. It's all designed communication, even when it feels spontaneous.
Yeah.
It's constructed to elicit a response.
The book uses Google as a really foundational example of this whole approach. PageRank.
Right.
Its genius wasn't trying to read and understand what websites were about.
No, not at all.
It was realizing that the structure of communication, who links to whom, these sort of digital votes, That was a powerful signal for relevance.
Exactly. And that model, the book calls it Googleization. It's spread everywhere. Systems that organize themselves by analyzing web dynamics, user behavior, collective intelligence, likes, retweets, links, rather than relying on experts to categorize things or trying to understand the meaning of the content itself.
So artificial communication really means interacting with something that's been built to be a communication partner by someone else who isn't actually in that specific interaction with you.
Yes. It's designed. It uses data and patterns to facilitate an interaction.
It's communication, but heavily mediated and shaped by algorithms.
Precisely.
And how do these partners communicate with us most obviously? The book points to something surprisingly basic. The list.
Oh, absolutely. Just think about your day online, search results, lists, Amazon, lists of products, TripAdvisor, lists of hotels, restaurants, your social media feed.
Oh, constantly updating lists.
Yeah.
We're swimming in lists.
And the book draws this really neat historical parallel back to the very beginnings of writing, Mesopotamia.
Okay.
The earliest texts we have, they weren't stories, they were lists, administrative lists, inventories, transactions.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And the Force argues that lists do something important. They create distance, introduce breaks, discontinuity between items. And that, it suggests, supported abstract thought. It was a step away from just depicting things.
And now, thousands of years later, digital lists, rankings, ratings, they're everywhere. And they totally shape how we evaluate almost everything.
Yeah, universities, products, movies, people.
It's all ranked.
The book basically says the web thinks in lists. Algorithms are lists of instructions, databases are lists of data, and the output we get is, well, usually another list.
So the digital age isn't just giving us a different order, it's like a new order of order, as the book puts it, moving away from those neat hierarchical trees.
Like Porphyry's tree, yeah?
To something more like, what, piles of leaves?
Yeah.
Flat lists based on tags, user behavior, connections, not predefined categories or meaning.
Exactly. It's less about inherent meaning and more about connections and usage patterns. It's a different way of organizing knowledge, almost echoing that very early, less abstract list making.
A structural shift. Okay, so sticking with processing information, how do algorithms deal with something like text? Words, meaning. The book talks a lot about visualization here.
It does, especially in fields like the digital humanities. It's a key tool.
So instead of reading a novel, scholars might visualize it. How does that work?
Well, they use algorithms to find patterns across maybe thousands of texts, things you could never see just by reading. And visualization helps make sense of those patterns.
And the book distinguishes between scientific visualization, like, say, a medical scan.
Right, tied to a physical object.
And information visualization, InfoVis, which uses abstract charts and graphs to explore data that doesn't have a physical form.
Exactly. And the really crucial point the source makes is the algorithms aren't just showing us patterns someone else found. They are actively finding the patterns themselves in the data.
But then the challenge is, these patterns they find are often based on processes we don't fully understand, right? They can be opaque. How do we make that useful, informative?
That's the key question, because as the book emphasizes, algorithms treat text as just strings of characters. They're semantically blind. They don't get the meaning.
So this is where that idea of distant reading comes in, that the source mentions.
That's it. Distant reading combines the algorithm's power to spot large-scale patterns, word frequencies, topic clusters, stylistic similarities across huge archives.
Things a human reader would miss.
With human interpretation. And visualization is the bridge. It presents those algorithmically found patterns visually, so a human researcher can then look at it and ask, okay, what might this mean?
So the algorithm finds the pattern, the visualization displays it, and the human interprets the meaning.
Precisely. The algorithm doesn't read like we do, but this combination creates a totally new, powerful way to analyze texts. It extends our analytical capabilities.
Even if the machine isn't thinking about the text at all.
Right. It's artificial communication, enabling a new form of analysis.
And this algorithmic processing. It gets very personal, doesn't it?
Oh.
Especially since Web 2.0, with all the user content, social media.
Oh, absolutely. Remember the early vision, the hyper-individualized web, Time Magazine's you as person of the year.
I do. The idea was we'd all perfectly curate our own little corner of the internet.
Yeah, but the book argues it turned out a bit more complicated than that. We didn't just swap standardization for personalization. We got these weird mixes of being active and passive, being individualized, but also anonymous in the data stream.
And a lot of the personalization happens kind of to us, right? Based on profiling, tracking, not necessarily us choosing settings.
Exactly. That famous, maybe slightly creepy Target example, figuring out a teenager was pregnant from her shopping data before her family knew.
Right. That wasn't her ticking a box saying, show me baby stuff.
Not at all. Pure data correlation. And the book calls this outcome mass personalization or generalized individualization. It feels tailored to you, but you're being passively customized based on data profiles.
Which leads directly to filter bubbles, right?
Yeah.
Eli Piritzer's concept.
Algorithms predicting what you'll like, showing you more of that, and potentially isolating you from different viewpoints or information that doesn't fit your predicted profile.
And the book touches on the dark sides. Maybe losing a shared sense of reality, being managed by what you don't know, feeling creeped out, or maybe even feeling less unique and more just. Massified, but in a targeted way.
Yeah, that creepy factor again. And users push back, don't they? Some try to block it. Ad blockers, privacy tools, which, ironically, often starve the algorithms of the data they use for personalization.
And others lean into it, doing what the book calls reverse personalization, like influencers carefully managing their online image and data.
Exactly. They're actively trying to shape how the algorithms, and therefore their audience, perceive them. They're playing the game, managing their digital self in response to the system.
The book uses a really interesting analogy here comparing interactive fiction,
Which mostly failed.
to video games. It says interactive fiction didn't quite work because readers generally want to observe the author's world. It's hard to enter the mirror and be a character while still seeing the whole picture.
Right. But video games, they use algorithms to create these virtual contingencies, these simulated worlds where you can actively intervene.
You can enter the mirror in a controlled way.
Yes. It's a different kind of algorithmic communication and a different grammar based on interaction, rules, and, well, fun. It lets you participate within the algorithmically generated space.
Okay, this leads us nicely into another huge area, memory and forgetting, and how algorithms mess with both.
Hugely relevant with things like the right to be forgotten.
Right.
Because the web basically stores everything, potentially forever, and algorithms make it instantly findable. That completely changes our relationship with the past. The book brings up that European court ruling.
Forcing Google to delist certain links.
Exactly. Even if the information itself was legally published somewhere else.
Right.
And the implication, the book argues, is that memories are becoming defined less by storage and more by accessibility through tools like search engines.
If you can't find it easily, it's effectively forgotten, even if it's still out there somewhere.
Precisely. And here's a really deep insight from the source. Human memory isn't just about remembering. It absolutely depends on forgetting.
Forgetting is active.
Yes, it's not just passive decay. It's an active process inhibition that lets us select what's important, organize our thoughts, be flexible. We need to forget the trivial to remember the crucial.
But algorithms, they don't really work like that, do they? The book says they operate in an eternal present.
Right. They process data based on their programming and the patterns they find now. They don't have that human sense of remembering or needing to forget to function.
So the problem flips. Historically, we worried about not being able to remember enough.
Exactly. Oral societies, early writing. The challenge was preservation.
And now the challenge is not being able to forget. The sheer persistence and accessibility of data.
That's the modern condition, the book suggests, and it makes a useful distinction. Algorithms process data, just differences, signals. But data only becomes information when it makes a difference to someone in a context.
So a data-driven society isn't necessarily the same as an information society. Interesting.
And algorithms shape social memory through this accessibility, processing not just the content, but the metadata, the data about the data. Who shared what when, who linked to what.
And people were now finding ways to sort of induce forgetting.
Yeah.
By working with the algorithms.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Things like obfuscation, basically generating noise, feeding the system loads of fake or ambiguous data to hide the real stuff.
Like hiding a needle in a giant haystack you just created.
Kind of. Or those reputation management companies that flood search results with neutral or positive fluff to push negative links way down the list.
So you're not deleting the data.
No.
You're just making it practically impossible to find. You're achieving the effect of forgetting through algorithmic manipulation without needing human-like memory or deletion.
It goes back to that library analogy from the court case. You keep the book on the shelf, but you remove the card from the catalog. The data's there, but access is blocked or made incredibly difficult.
It really highlights that the problem now is managing abundance, not scarcity.
Absolutely.
Okay, from memory in the past Let's jump to the future. Prediction. That's a huge function of algorithms now.
Massive. And the book draws a really interesting contrast between algorithmic prediction and traditional statistics.
How are they different?
Well, think about it. Statistics usually deals with present uncertainty, often uses samples of data, focuses on averages or distributions, and often aims for explanation, for causality.
Right, like sampling voters to predict an election outcome for the whole population.
Exactly. Algorithmic prediction, though. It's often focused explicitly on the future. It uses huge, often messy, unselected data sets, sometimes all the data.
And all they sometimes say.
Right. It finds complex correlations and patterns that might be totally opaque to human reasoning, and it often aims for specific individual predictions.
Not the average voter, but predicting how you specifically will vote or what product you will buy next.
Precisely. And here's where the book makes that really provocative comparison. It argues that algorithmic prediction, in some ways, structurally resembles ancient divination more than modern science.
Whoa, divination. Like reading entrails or casting bones.
Structurally, not literally, of course, but think about it. Both divination and algorithmic prediction often bypass step-by-step causal explanation. They rely on complex, often obscure procedures, the supposed cosmic order, the algorithm's complex internal weighting to process disparate inputs and generate a specific prediction or judgment. The mechanism is often a black box to the user, maybe even the creator.
Okay, I see the structural parallel, though the underlying concept of time is radically different, right?
Oh, totally. Divination often assumed a somewhat knowable, structured future. Modern science deals with uncertainty in an open future. Machine learning is trying to predict a future that hasn't happened, based on patterns from the past.
And this shift to individual predictions is key. Predictive analytics. It's not just forecasting general trends, but predicting your specific risk, your likely behavior.
Exactly, and the really mind-bending part the book explores is, what if the algorithms don't just predict the future, but actually help create it?
How does that happen?
Well, by acting on the prediction. If Amazon predicts you'll want a certain book and suggests it, maybe you buy it because it was suggested. The prediction influenced the outcome.
Or predictive policing, sending patrols to an area because the algorithm predicted crime.
Their very presence could alter behavior in that area, potentially confirming the prediction or maybe displacing crime elsewhere. It creates feedback loops.
Self-fulfilling prophecies. Or maybe even self-defeating ones.
Exactly. It introduces these complex circularities. And the fundamental challenge is that algorithms learn from past data, but the future isn't always like the past. That's the generalization problem.
And with incredibly complex, high-dimensional data.
The risk of overfitting, finding patterns in the training data that aren't actually real in the wider world is huge. You can get predictions that are just wrong, or as the book puts it, sometimes hallucinatory.
So the algorithms are kind of blind to the future they might be helping to bring about.
In a sense, yes. It highlights this deep tension between the drive to predict and the inherent unpredictability of complex systems, especially when the prediction itself becomes an input into the system.
Okay, let's shift one last time to images and experience, and how algorithms are changing our relationship with the present moment. The book kicks off with just the sheer volume of digital images.
It's almost incomprehensible, isn't it? That Flickr example, 1 million photos uploaded in 24 hours, visualized as a huge stack. Digital images are basically free, endlessly copyable, storable.
And the book argues this changes what photography is even for. It's shifted maybe from primarily being about memory, about capturing the past,
to being much more about communication in the present. We snap photos constantly on our phones sometimes. Well, sometimes, instead of just being there, experiencing it directly.
Yeah, that idea that images can usurp reality. Capturing the selfie becomes the experience, or watching an event through your phone screen as you record it.
Like flash mobs, where everyone's filming themselves being part of it. The book frames this as potentially facilitating an escape from the immediate contextual present.
But then, it points to a counter-trend, too. A kind of rediscovery of physical presence, sometimes because of the digital overload.
Exactly. Certain kinds of art experiences, for instance. And Christian Marclay's The Clock is the prime example used.
Ah, the 24-hour film made of movie clips showing the time.
That's the one. It's incredible. It takes the absolute excess of digital images, thousands of clips of clocks from films, but uses it to create an experience that is intensely focused on the actual present moment.
Because the film shows the real time, right now.
Precisely. If you walk in at 3:17 p.m., the film is showing movie clips where a clock reads 3:17 p.m. It uses the digital flood to ground you, collectively, in the here and now. It's a kind of reversal.
Wow, that's clever. Using the problem as the solution in a way.
And the insight there is that these digital distinctions, abundance, scarcity, escape, immersion, presence, absences, they aren't simple opposites. They're tied together. The very technology that enables escape can also be used to create new forms of reflective awareness of the present.
So the challenge is managing that excess, that data flood, to enable reflection, not just distraction.
Finding ways to create meaningful scarcity or focus within the abundance.
Okay, so let's try to wrap up this deep dive into artificial communication.
Right.
The core idea, it seems, is really powerful. Shifting focus from artificial intelligence to artificial communication.
Yeah, arguing that algorithms are fundamentally reshaping communication itself, and that's the key transformation we need to understand.
And they do this not by understanding meaning like we do,
Yeah.
but through their sheer power in processing data, finding patterns, making correlations, and that impacts everything, how we find stuff, how we interact, our identity, memory, time.
This research gives us a really valuable framework, specific ways to see how algorithms are acting as communication partners and changing these fundamental aspects of social life and how we know things.
And it really hammers home that point.
Mm-hmm.
To grasp the impact of algorithms, maybe comparing them to human minds isn't the most useful approach. We need to look at what they do within our communication networks.
Yeah, they're not just tools waiting to be used. They're active participants structuring the interaction.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Given everything we've talked about, how algorithms might manufacture the future they predict, how they reshape memory by controlling access, how they mediate our experience of presence, what does it really mean to be an autonomous person navigating this world? When our communication partners are increasingly artificial, pattern-driven, maybe even a bit inscrutable, what parts of being human become more important or change completely in response?
Definitely leaves you with a lot to think about.